Hi, my name is David Holt, and this is the screencast for Week 2 of Advanced Legal Research Intellectual Property Introduction to Copyright. This week we'll be going over a broad overview of materials available for copyright legal research and the basics in terms of formalities and registration. So the very basics of copyright, for those of you that have not yet taken the IP survey course, copyright is the area of intellectual property which covers expressions of creative ideas. Some examples include songs, artwork, writing, film, software, architecture, and video games. The Statute of Anne was the precursor to the modern copyright legal schema. That has, of course, been updated a number of times since then. Notable statutes which have modified the copyright scheme include the Copyright Act of 1909, 1976, and the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA. Okay, in terms of subject matter for copyright, there are some basic elements for it to qualify under the schema, and that includes that it be original, that it is fixed in a medium, that it is a idea and expression, and that there is it's a work of authorship. Oh, and by the way, the reason why I selected this clip art image for this slide is this is the notable Oscar Wilde photo that was the subject of litigation, and the court held that the photographer did have copyright over the image as he staged the image, had Mr. Wilde pose in a particular way, created the setting, the lighting. There was an expressive element that was included in the photo that satisfied the originality requirement for copyright. Other formalities, depending on the date of the work, may include publication, that it's fixed and been published, notice, that there is a copyright notice included with the work, and deposit with the Library of Congress, and registration with the U.S. Copyright Office, which is within the Library of Congress. Okay, some other elements of copyright include its duration, which is going to vary depending on what law governed based on when the work was created. Renewal, there is a renewal term that a author can elect to use. It may or may not be automatic, depending again on when the work was created. And restoration of copyright. We're also going to be dealing with issues of ownership, transfer, and termination. So initial ownership, transfers, and licenses, and termination of transfers. I'm going to create a problem this week that will deal with intestacy statutes and copyright ownership. Okay, copyright gives a set of exclusive rights to copyright holders along with some limitations. We will discuss derivative works, public distribution, public performance, and also the doctrine of fair use. Fair use has some basic elements that are generally recognized by the courts as required for use to be permissible. And that is the purpose and character of the use, of the nature of the work, the amount of the copyrighted work that is used, and its effect on a potential market. I have a Weird Al Yankovic clip art here. That's a parody of a famous Nirvana album art. Parody, satire are considered or may be considered permissible uses under the fair use doctrine, as is academic use of copyright materials. The readings that I'm using for this course, for example, are protected under copyright. However, I have them restricted to our class via the Google Drive settings, and so they are within the fair use doctrine and within my rights. Okay, infringement and remedies. There are a number of remedies that are available to copyright holders in the event of infringement. Those include injunctions, damages and profits derived from the infringement, statutory damages, and we're going to go over all of that later in this week. So in terms of the primary materials that we have available in copyright legal research, we start with the statutory and legislative materials that have been produced. The first copyright statute is the 1790 Act, followed by an act in 1909 and 1976. The DMCA is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which was enacted in 2000. Virtually all of these statutes have been codified into the U.S. Code. There are also specialized case reporters for cases dealing with copyright, in addition to your standard federal reporters, which would be the Federal Supplement and the Federal Reporter, and your U.S. Supreme Court case reporters. There are also specialized reporters that deal exclusively with copyright or deal with copyright along with other areas of intellectual property. The two big specialized reporters that we'll deal with is the Copyright Law Reporter, that's published by CCH and is licensed and available on Westlaw, and also BNA's United States Patent Quarterly, which is often abbreviated as USPQ, and it is available on both Lexis and Bloomberg. Copyright regulations are codified in Title 37 of the CFR. The Code of Federal Regulations is available on all of the platforms that we use, so Westlaw, Lexis, and Bloomberg. It's also available for free via a number of other sources. Remember, unlike statutory code, there are not annotations that have been provided by publishers to the federal regulations, but you can shepherdize and key cite sections from the CFR to see where they have been cited in published opinions, in legal scholarship, and in other secondary materials. Okay, administrative materials are important for all areas of intellectual property. The U.S. Copyright Office publishes a number of administrative materials, including a compendium of U.S. Copyright Office practices. These are going to be essential sources for copyright registration, for the formalities that are involved in acquiring a valid copyright. Okay, now as we get into secondary materials, there's two big legal treatises that deal with copyright, which are considered very persuasive by the courts. One is used far more than the other. Nimmer on copyright, which is available on Lexis, is the most cited treatise dealing with copyright. Patry is the corollary equivalent that is available on Westlaw. It, however, is cited to far less frequently than Nimmer by the courts. Legal scholarship is also an important area of materials dealing with copyright. Legal scholarship is published largely by student-edited law journals, and we're quickly moving towards an open access publishing model for legal scholarship. So legal scholarship is likely to be available via a Google search, as many law schools are placing their law reviews on institutional repositories or on their own websites. Lots of legal scholarship is moving towards open access, so keep that in mind when looking at the cost associated with acquiring legal scholarship via Westlaw, Lexis, or Bloomberg. Much of that is going to be available for free via other sources. And then practice materials, which I'm going to spend quite a bit of time in this course dealing with practice materials, as this was not touched on at all during your first year of law. Practice materials, as the name implies, are designed for working legal professionals, not for academics, and we have them roughly broken down into the following categories. And so model documents, so model pleadings, model interrogatories, model forms, Current awareness materials, and so current awareness materials will include your newsletters and your wire services. Those are recent developments within a legal practice area to keep a practitioner appraised of developments in their area. And then a checklist, proof of facts, and the list goes on and on and on. Okay, let's take a break here and take a look at some of the materials that we have available to us on all three of the platforms and via the agency's website. So this is Westlaw Next. I'm going to navigate to practice areas here and then to intellectual property. And this will give us a broad overview as to what materials are going to be available on this platform. If we click on secondary sources here under Browse Intellectual Property, and then all intellectual property text and treatises, I want to point out a few of the important materials that are here under copyright. And you'll see they have Copyright Litigation Handbook, Copyright Throughout the World. The really important treatise here is Patry on Copyright. And that's going to be your go-to place on Westlaw to begin your research on an on a copyright intellectual property question. Ekstrom is the source for licensing. So for copyright licensing issues, Ekstrom is going to be a good source for that, as is some of the other form books that we're going to dive into later this week. You'll also notice here that CCH, which is owned by Wolters Kluwer, has some material that has been licensed out to Westlaw available here. So if we click on CCH Intellectual Properties Library, you'll see that the Copyright Law Reporter is included in that set. If we click on the Copyright Law Reporter, that will give us a template using these segments, which we can use to locate cases, both reported and unreported cases that have dealt with copyright issues. If we go into Lexis Advanced, we can do roughly the same task. Click on Practice Area and then go down to Copyright Law. And Lexis has the advantage here in terms of availability of treatises that are considered far more authoritative and are far more used by the court than the treatises on Westlaw. And the big one here is Nimmer on Copyright and then Milgram on Licensing. If you click on the table of contents here for Nimmer on Copyright, you'll see that this is a multi-volume set that includes lots and lots of materials dealing with copyright. Think of this as your copyright Bible. And just to further that point, let me go into all feds here, into all federal cases. And if we do a search for Nimmer within the same sentence as copyright, you'll see that there's 2,100 reported cases which have cited to Nimmer. If we do that same search using Westlaw's copyright treatise, you'll see that the number is far smaller. So Nimmer is considered really the authoritative treatise on copyright. If we go to Bloomberg, which is our third platform here, and then go to Practice Centers and then Intellectual Property, and then Copyright Law, You'll see that they do have materials from the Practicing Law Institute, also called PLI, in addition to BNA. So BNA will include materials such as the Copyright Law Desk Book, Software and Information Licensing, the big value with Bloomberg, in contrast with the other platforms, is its current awareness tools. If you go to News and Law Reports and then BNA Law Reports, and then down to Intellectual Property, you'll see that there is a current awareness newsletter available via Bloomberg that is considered far more valuable among practitioners than the tools from Westlaw or Lexis. And so to keep abreast of recent developments, whether those are recent court decisions or proposed or enacted legislative actions, the BNA newsletter is often very valuable. And then finally, the U.S. Copyright Office will include those administrative and agency materials, and so the compendium, sections from the CFR, from the federal regulations, and the statutory code, in addition to other materials on how to search for copyright and how to apply for a copyright via this office. Very brief overview of copyright registration. Registration of copyright is not required. Rights exist once the work is fixed. It does, however, impact available remedies for infringement, such as statutory damages and attorney fees. Generally, a copyright owner must submit 2 copies of their work to the Library of Congress. Deposit is considered mandatory, but failure to deposit does not invalidate the copyright. Okay, in terms of our class site for this week, hopefully you have already watched the 4 screencasts from last week and read through our 3 assigned readings. There are 2 quizzes that will be due on the 7th of this month, one dealing with Boolean logic, terms and connectors, and segment searching. I want you to have an understanding of the advanced search tools on all 3 of the platforms. And just to help me understand where you're at right now, I would like you to complete, again, before the 7th, a brief refresher on federal law in terms of the legal research materials that are available. Just for fun, I included the pricing guide from both Westlaw and Lexis under supplemental materials here for the first week to give you an idea as to the legal research costs that are associated with those 2 platforms. You have the privilege now of not having to think about the cost associated with legal research. When you are out in the real world and practicing, you will have to think of what legal research is going to cost you, how you can bill that back to the customer if you can or not, and how you can maximize your time and use your sources efficiently. For this week, in addition to this screencast that you're watching now, there is a screencast dealing with practice materials and docket searching on Bloomberg, which I really want you to go over. And then we have 2 assignments. One is on copyright application, the other is on copyright duration. And then I have links to the major sources, which we have already discussed. If you have any questions about the assignments for this week, please email me either directly or via Camino, and I will respond as quickly as I can.